Before we get started today, I want to say please watch to the end of the video because if you find this video interesting, you're really going to like what I have at the end. But I hope you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new around here, and let's get started. It's no secret that Fromsoftware really likes to draw from old mythology and old tales when crafting their game and the lore that surrounds it. When we play Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Sekiro, we can constantly see the inspiration at play, and we can already see the impact a lot of these old mythologies are having on the world of Elden Ring. So today I want to take a deep dive into the impact that Celtic mythology specifically is having on the lore of Elden Ring, and we can already see a ton of it going on. As we begin, let me refresh your knowledge on the overall lore of the Lands Between. Tarnished of the Lands Between, the Golden Order has been shattered. Throughout the Lands Between, demigods holding shards of the Elden Ring squabble and make war over the ruins of a perfect realm, now abandoned by the golden guidance of the Greater Will. As the echoes of this conflict thunder in the distance, an outcast arrives. Once their ancestors called the Lands Between home, but the blessed light of grace was lost to their tribe long ago and they were expelled from the kingdom. They are the Tarnished, and they have returned to claim the Elden Lordship promised to them by legend. Now, for a moment, I want you to imagine a perfect world. Try to think of the Lands Between before the shattering, and think about what exactly would make the world perfect. And now I'm going to tell you about Tir Na Nog, or the other world from Celtic mythology. Tir Na Nog is the supernatural home of the Tuatha Dé Danann, a pantheon of warrior gods under the blessing of the goddess Danu. Tir Na Nog is described as an island of everlasting youth, beauty, health, abundance, and joy. Here, the Tuatha Dé Danann enjoy a life of poetry, music, entertainment, and feasting. Now, simply based off this, we can't draw a definite connection between Tir Na Nog and the Lands Between. However, it's when we look at how one gains access to the land where we can see the definite inspiration. According to legend, it's said that Tir Na Nog can be accessed in a number of ways. Some of these ways include going underground through cave systems, on a magical boat, or, here's the interesting part, following a golden path across a sea of fog on an enchanted spirit horse. Now let's look back and see how the Tarnished got to the Lands Between.
Oh, you tragic thing. You've crossed the sea of fog all the way to the Riftlands. Well, this is the very edge of the map.
To further cement this connection, let me tell you of another legend, about a hero who found his way to Tir Na Nog. The hero's name was Oisin. Oisin met a maiden from the otherworld named Neve, who traveled on a magical spirit horse that could cross water. The two fell in love, and Neve took Oisin to Tir Na Nog. The two spent some time there enjoying their everlasting youth. However, Oisin became homesick and wanted to return to his homeland, and Neve gave him the spirit horse reluctantly so that he could cross the ocean back. But it came with a warning. Neve warned Oisin that if he were to return back, he must never depart from the spirit horse and touch the ground. The story ends that when Oisin returned back to Ireland, he instinctively hopped off his mount and touched the ground, wherein which all the time he spent in Tir Na Nog caught up with him and he died of old age on the spot. So let's look at all the connections we have here. Both Tir Na Nog and the Lands Between before the shattering are described as these perfect worlds, where to access them you must cross a sea of fog and follow the guidance of the Golden Will. And we can also see that Elden Ring starts where a maiden presents us with a spirit horse that happens to be very good at not touching the ground, since we can see that it can both double jump and do these giant leaps. So if you want to get into speculation based off the story of Tir Na Nog and Oisin, we know that the Lands Between was perfect before the shattering, and we can also see after the shattering a rot appears to be spreading across the land. Now perhaps this rot could be all the years they spent of eternal youth catching up with them just like it did for Oisin. And we also have one last connection between the two. A description of Tir Na Nog by another person who arrived there named Dermot. Once on the island, Dermot encountered a vast sylvan tract of dense forest where he was surrounded by the melodious sounds of streams, wind, birds, and bees. In the midst of the forest, he crossed a plain and spotted a giant immense tree with interlacing branches. Now, moving on from the Lands Between, we also have many other smaller connections and things that seem to be based off Celtic mythology. Now, let me tell you the story of an old king of the Tuatha Dé Danann named Nuada. Nuada was the first king of the Tuatha who led them in battle against the Firbolg, one of their old ancient enemies. In the battle, Nuada loses one of his arms, and because of this, the Tuatha decide that he can no longer be king because he's no longer physically perfect. In the place of his arm, he later receives a working silver arm, which therefore restores his honor only partially. Because of this, he's given the name Nuada of the Silver Hand, and later on through magic, he gets a new arm of flesh and blood and is rethroned as the king of the Tuatha. Now we have something in the trailer that might be inspired by this. If we take a look at the Valkyrie, before she fights us, she attaches an arm of gold but not of silver. Now at first this might not be a definite connection, but there is something that cements it pretty heavily for me. This is an old statue of Nuada, and he appears to be attaching his new arm, since we can see the sleeve on his right arm and his left arm is unclothed, and the pose is exactly the same as we can see with the Valkyrie attaching her golden arm. So I think there's some pretty clear inspiration going on here. The next thing I want to talk about is this astral stag that we see in the trailer. Now, we don't have any context for this stag in Elden Ring, but if we look at the white stag in Celtic mythology, there's stuff to note here. According to Celtic folklore, the appearance of a white stag is symbolic of the crossing of the real world and the astral world, and it's thought that the appearance of these white stags only happened after a bad taboo had been committed. So if we look at this stag in the context of Elden Ring, we can clearly see that there's lots of mythical stuff going on, and we know that this is taking place after the shattering, which I can only assume would be an absolutely horrible taboo. Another connection we have that we've had for quite a while is the connection between the giants and the Green Man. Now, this is a very surface level connection in that their faces are almost the exact same, and that's about all we've got for it, but the Green Man is an old Celtic symbol that would be placed on things like churches and important buildings to symbolize the growth of nature and vitality, and obviously as a way of hoping for a good crop that year. Now, we can see on the design of the giants, the offshoots that are coming from their face are very symbolic of roots, as we can see individual strands branching off into 2 or 3 at their ends. So perhaps these giants were once nature spirits, and the shattering brought them down into this withered form. The final one I want to talk about today is a connection between this old Celtic monster called the Kelpie and this official screen cap that we got. According to folklore, the Kelpie was a monster that would inhabit the lochs and swamps, taking the form of a beautiful horse, and when somebody would try to ride it, its true form would be revealed and it would ride them straight to the depths of the lake. Now, aside from appearance, we don't have much to go off here, but the connection is interesting nonetheless. Now, on top of this, there's numerous other Celtic symbols throughout the trailer that I really don't have time to get into. However, these are just the major ones that I've noticed so far. And if you made it this far, I've got something else to talk about. Back before we even knew Elden Ring was going to have Celtic symbolism in it, I began writing a book that combined all my favorite things from Dark Souls and Bloodborne with old Celtic mythological tales. And this book is called The Night of the Red Sky. It's a narrative fantasy novel that I began writing around the same time I started this channel. And if you're a fan of the Soul series, I bet you really like it, and there's tons of direct stories from Celtic mythology that play out throughout the narrative. If you want to learn more about the book, I'll leave a link in the description, and I am giving away a free digital copy of Elden Ring to one of you that leaves a review on the book. Doesn't have to be a good review, just your honest thoughts about the story and what you liked and didn't like. But anyways guys, that's gonna pretty much do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like on it and subscribe if you're not already, and let me know, what are some other things in the trailer that are inspired from mythology? Doesn't have to be Celtic. I know there's a lot of other Norse inspiration that we'll get into another time, but leave me a comment down there and I'll catch you in the next one.